Welcome back once again for another SnowRunner truck review. Today I bring you two brand new farming vehicles added in SnowRunner in the Grand Harvest DLC for the purpose of farming some potatoes and maybe some other things as well. So before we start, I ask that you please help support the channel by liking the video and subscribing to the channel as well. Alright, let's get started, shall we? Alright, so as you can see, I have the Kirovets K700 here, and then also its brother, the Kirovets K7M. I'm going to do this in an informal fashion, going through the cons of each vehicle, and then I will do a conclusion at the end. I also need to apologize for this video coming out rather late since Season 8 came out in October. I just have been doing some things with life, and I have been off work for about a month because I took some vacation. So I just wanted to relax and then kind of reset before I actually went back to work. So anyways, let's get started here with the downside. Number one here for the Kirovets K700, and that is going to be this engine right here, the 530 Tango, only in name. Now, while I actually added this as a downside, now it looks right here that you have the best engine in the game, which has 260,000 torque. However, when you go into the game files, you will understand that it actually is just a placeholder, and this vehicle only has 175,000 torque instead of the regular 260,000 torque, which is the highest torque value in the game. You can reference this if you go into the files and look this up. You can tell that there's two locations for this engine. One is in Phase 8. The other one, which has 260,000 torque, is actually in Zimnegorsk, that is in Tamir, and that is shared by about 10 vehicles right now currently in the game. And this engine right here is only exclusive for the Kirovets K700, only giving you 175,000 torque. So that's why this is in here on the downside, so just be aware of that. Next one I want to talk about, downside number two, is going to be front overhang. Now, as you can see, you're going to have some big tires here at 63 inches, and we'll talk about actually having decent ground clearance. However, it's kind of hard to get around that you have a very large nose sticking out here. It's rather big. You're going to soak up some damage there. I don't think it's going to be too big of an issue, but however, for a review, I had to bring this up because I have damaged my engine from just running into things, even going off into the berm whenever you're turning around, running into a ditch or something like that. You'll take some damage to your engine, so that's just something to be aware of. Now, moving on to downside number three, something that I just couldn't elude this list without having some comments is going to be no chained tire option. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal right now because Phase 8, however, is a summer map. It's basically just mud. You don't necessarily need chains. However, if you were going to use this vehicle in another region, say Amur, Kola Peninsula, the flooded foothills, or even in Yukon, you're going to have some issues if you are planning on going on any icy surfaces because you have no chained option. So that's another one to just keep your eye on there. And then moving on, downside number four, something I noticed in my gameplay, and I've kind of cross-checked this with a couple other people, is it is not good at handling rocks. I've been high-centered a lot in this vehicle. It doesn't have really good properties with its suspension, so it's going to be kind of hard to crawl over those rocks, even though it does have 63-inch mud tires. I did make a couple crossings through some water in this thing, and it got high-centered going through some water, so I just had to put that on there as well. I don't think it's super good for crawling over rocks. However, I don't think it's that bad, but it's just something I think should be on the downsides list as well. Coming in at number 5 is handling. Now, this vehicle turns in the center, as you can see here, right where this is connected. You see this, here's where it turns, this is the actuation, the articulation of this vehicle. Both vehicles turn like that. While I don't think this one is worse than the K7M, this still has to go on the list because whenever you're farming, you'll know that this doesn't have a big turning radius. And there's been some times where you have to kind of maneuver in a way to get yourself turned around, or even in smaller places. The turning radius has been something that has hindered me in Phase 8 playing with this so far. So just keep that in mind. That is downside number 5. Downside number 6, I believe, is versatility. And I say this not really in a sense that it's terrible with versatility. It can do other things. One thing I want to mention before I continue with versatility is these stock wheel fenders here. You can add these. However, if you take them off, you actually just have your tires sticking out. So I like to take those off just so they don't catch on anything. However, let's get back to the versatility, downside number 6. As you can see, you can have a van body here, and that gives you 800 repair points, six spare wheels, and you also can use this manipulator crane. You can use this to pick up cargo if you want. Haven't really tried it too much. You can try to pick up logs with it. I probably don't recommend doing a lot of that when you can just use a small crane or a crane to do things faster. But hey, it can do this stuff. So it can do other things. It can pull regular trailers as well. However, it's just not a super versatile vehicle. It's very specialized just to do farming. So moving on to downside number 7, it's lightweight for a tractor. Now, this was kind of odd for me because when I look at the Kirovets K700, it looks like a rather heavy vehicle. However, it's only 13.2 US tons, and while you're probably thinking that is actually pretty large when you think about it, it is the 5th lightest in its heavy class. So in the heavy class, it's the 5th lightest. So compared to its brother, which its weight would be in its pros because it weighs a lot more, so it's benefiting from its grip is benefiting from its weight. This, however, I don't think is the case, even though I believe having those larger tires and the always-on features definitely help this thing get through some pretty muddy conditions, as we will learn. And finally, moving on to downside number 8, other rescue vehicles are still on par or better. Now, when I showed you these frame add-ons, I did show you the van body. It can actually be a rescue vehicle if you needed to. You can hook this up and go rescue vehicles because the silhouette is, or not the silhouette, the width of this vehicle is not that large, so you can kind of get into the smaller places. However, with downside number 5, you have to understand your handling is not going to be that good. And also with downside number 3, you don't have a chained option, so you're kind of limited if you want to go crawl over some rocks and some icy areas. So there's just other vehicles in the game currently that I would probably pick to be a rescue vehicle other than the Kirovets K700. And that is the wrap up for the cons. We're going to get started here on the pros for the Kirovets K700. Okay, to start off our upsides list, at the normal number 1 spot is going to be all-wheel drive and diff lock, with the exception of power because of our downside number 2 that we talked about earlier. And now I just want to mention to you guys that in the PTS, this vehicle actually didn't have a diff lock. It had the always-on all-wheel drive, I believe. It and its brother, the K7M, and the results of this actually showed when farming or going through any deep mud that it was just losing performance, because whenever you do not have a diff lock, you're gonna lose power. Power is gonna bleed off from your wheels because you're not forcing all your power to every single axle on your vehicle, forcing all those tires to turn. And I kind of explained this in a sense on my mud running tips video, the importance of having all-wheel drive and diff lock in conjunction. So go check out that video if you want to learn a little bit more about it and want to see some more examples. However, let's move on here to upside number 2. It's going to be tires. Now, this vehicle has some of the largest tires in the game. They are not the largest, but they are up there with some of the better trucks in the game at 63 inches. It only has a mud tire. So all-wheel drive and diff lock always on in conjunction with very large tires, and you're going to see that it's going to do pretty darn well in deep muddy conditions or even snowy conditions as well. Okay, moving on to upside number 3 is going to be stability. Oddly, this has a very narrow frame, very narrow gate, and a higher silhouette, it kind of looks like. However, anytime that I was farming in my turns, going down into those ditches in a full lock left or right turn, even with a trailer, with the planter trailer that's actually elevated off the ground surface, or even going through terrain period, I've never flipped the Kirovets over, and I drove it pretty much like it was careless, going down to those ditches, even off-roading off the beaten path. I never tipped it over. And a fun fact is, if you look at its files, there's no weight actually in its cab. It's all in parts of the truck, so the center of gravity is very low on both of these vehicles. So you're going to have some really good stability in this vehicle, and that'll allow you to basically drive it without care, which is definitely a plus for me. Moving on to upside number 4, there is no snorkel needed. Something I did test with both these vehicles was taking them into some deep water places in the flooded foothills to just test out how much of a tolerance to water do they have. And I actually can tell you that this vehicle right here did a better water test than the K7M. You can see this air filter right here. It's not a snorkel, it's actually an air filter intake system. Basically, it's elevated to keep from dust or something like that going in there. I believe I was told that by Max Power. So from that information, this is actually not a snorkel, it's just an air intake or air filter. And something I noticed is you can get the water almost up past this whole cab before it actually starts to take damage. And I thought that was pretty good that you do not need a snorkel attached to this vehicle to go pretty deep in water, considering you do have 60 some inch tires. So the water that you need to go down into to actually drown this thing is still rather deep. Okay, so moving on to upside number 5, it can do more than just farming. And like I said in our cons, downside number 6, it was versatility. However, you can use this thing as a rescue vehicle. You can attach other type of trailers to it. You can even pull cargo with it. You can really use this vehicle in other sense. You can even use it as a potential loader if you really want to go that route with a manipulator crane. I probably wouldn't suggest it because you can do things faster with just the normal cranes. But if you wanted to, it's there for your choosing. And like I said before, you can actually have a decent rescue vehicle if you choose to do so. So I just wanted to add that in there on the upsides because you can do things like that. Okay, coming in at our final upside is going to be range and consumption. Now, as you can see, it only has a 340 liter, 90 gallon tank, and its engine actually is pretty darn efficient. However, it's not that strong, as I said. It does have the advanced special gearbox, sorry, that I do believe is driving a pretty good consumption value. You have larger tires to go over things. You're going to be able to clear distances relatively fast. 90 gallons, 340 liters is pretty darn large. You don't have any other fuel that comes with this van body add-on like its brother does. However, you're still going to have good range, good consumption. I actually got a lot of farming done and didn't really take much fuel, even going across vast areas of maps and repositioning. I noticed that both Kirivets didn't burn much fuel at all, so that is always going to be an upside. Okay, well now we're going to jump over and talk about the Kirovets K7M, the downside, so let's get to it. Okay, so to start off here with the Kirovets K7M, as you can see, it's sitting right here. Here's this top engine sitting here, and this is going to be the highlight of our downside number 1. It's going to be odd engine and power. So something I was kind of confused about with this vehicle weighing as much as it does, as you will find out a little bit later, it only has 170,000 torque for a massive tractor. This is one of the heavier vehicles in the game. It's not the heaviest, it's up there with the heavier vehicles in the game, and we'll talk about that later in the pros. However, having 170,000 torque, even less, 5,000 less than its brother, the K700, I felt this one should be on there. As you can see, it only has a B+ power to weight with its max engine, so this could not escape the list. However, I do think this vehicle still does really good, even with a B+ power to weight. So, moving on here, next is going to be front overhang. As you can see, the front overhang does stick out. I have taken a lot of damage to the engine just from terrain changes coming up. There's a lot of steep bumps that are just rapid and abrupt on Season 8. It's a pretty friendly map, however, I did take some engine compartment damage just from traversing into those ditches or going through shortcuts that I wanted to take with these tractors to give them a little bit more of a try. The ground clearance is actually pretty decent considering it does have the largest tires in the game, so it's not really that much of a concern. However, you do have a pretty big nose. That's just something I wanted to highlight here. Coming in at number 3 is going to be no chained option as well. You only have 2 options for tires. I would use the second option. If you want to go to some snowy or rocky snowy areas where there's ice, you're not going to perform that well with this thing. It's just not really conducive to those conditions, and there's some other things that we'll talk about here at in downside number 4, which is rock crawling and vehicle size. And as you can see with the double tires here, that's something you can use is the double wide tires. There's the singles, and then you have the doubles, which is an upgrade you find in Season 8. However, with the double tires, as you know, there's a lot of areas in SnowRunner that require a smaller vehicle type to get through, and this vehicle is probably one of the widest vehicles in the game. So some of those areas that you can take some rescue vehicles into, if you choose to use this as a rescue vehicle, it's going to be challenging unless you downgrade your tires. But the thing is, as we'll find out later, these double tires is some of the reason it has such good performance. So rock crawling is also not really good in this vehicle. It doesn't have great suspension properties. As you can see, there's not a lot of suspension travel that it has to go anywhere. There's only a few inches pretty much off the treads to the fenders, so it's not going to take boulders that well. But overall, I don't think it's too terrible. So moving on to handling. Something I wanted to say about the K7M over the K700 is the K7M handles so much worse when farming than the K7M. That's just my experience. I actually chose to use the K700 throughout most of my farming because the turning radius of this thing, especially when attached to a trailer, it is huge. So trying to get your trailer turned around to farm and all that stuff was something I just didn't really like. I found it wasn't very pleasurable, especially with the wide turning radius that this thing has. It's very big, lumbering vehicle. It does do great, but it just can't turn well at all. So moving on here to number 6, it has no snorkel. As you can see, here's that air intake system that comes up here. I believe this is to keep away dust and dirt and stuff from going into the air intake, because when you're farming, you're kicking up dust and you don't want that driving right into your engine. So that's there. However, when this vehicle hits about here-ish in water, you will start taking damage to your engine compartment, so you can't actually dunk this thing farther than its brother, the K7M. So that's something you should just keep in the back of your mind. But you can get this thing in some water and not take damage just because it is so big, so tall with those big, large tires. Okay, so moving on to number 7, it's going to be versatility as well. As you can see, there is only one frame add-on to this vehicle, and it's either that or it's farming. So you really can't do much more than just be a repair vehicle if you choose to do so. If you take into consideration the vehicle size and getting into those smaller areas, or it's going to be farming. So it doesn't have too much versatility. And now coming in at the number 8 spot, the final downside here is going to be somewhat difficult to farm with. And I kind of talked about this in our number 5 downside. It's just hard to handle. Making those turns, especially when farming, you don't have much room outside the farming areas. Sometimes you actually go down into a ditch or there's trees nearby. There's only a few farming areas where you can actually swing your vehicle past the farming area and get a good wide turn in. And even so, you have to take a very, very wide turn with the Kirovets K7M opposed to the Kirovets K700. So I felt that this one should be highlighted. However, it is a very good farming vehicle. It does plow through those muddy fields even when they do get muddy. So that is my 8th and final downside for the downsides list, guys. Let's jump over and talk about some good news. My favorite, the pros. Okay, so moving on to the pros list, coming in at upside number 1, it's going to be identical as the Kirovets K700. It's going to be all-wheel drive and differential locking, and as you can see, it has always-on features here, always-on all-wheel drive and always-on diff lock. In the PTS, like I said before, it did not have the diff lock feature, and there was just so much performance left on the table when you don't have a diff lock, and then it was added. And as you can see, this vehicle, basically, if you've driven it, you can understand how great it does with both of these features always on. And then to add to that, our number 2 upside is going to be weight. Now, this vehicle weighs 21.7 US tons. It is almost as heavy as the Boar. It is almost as heavy as the P12, the Cat 745C, and the Western Star 6900 twin steer. Those vehicles are some of the more heavier vehicles in the game. So just to give you kind of a glimpse of how good this vehicle's weight is, and in conjunction with its always-on features. And then moving on to our upside number 3, which is tires. Now, as you can see here, 79-inch tires are massive. They are the largest tires in the game. There is no other vehicle that has larger tires than the Kirivets. Something amazing about the Kirivets, as you already seen here on the screen, is the double wide tires. They're having 21.7 tons with double wide tires, always on differential locking and all-wheel drive. That basically drives us right home to upside number 4, and that is going to be mud performance and snow performance. So there was a study done by SD1. He actually put out a video on his findings from doing testing with the Kirovets K700 or the K7M here against some pretty good elite off-roaders that are the bigger, heavier trucks in the game. And the Kirovets K7M dominated a lot of those categories, actually edged out some really good trucks like the Cat 745C, the Kolobs and such. And it was kind of surprising, even with 170,000 torque rating on its engine, these tires, the always-on features, and its weight really drive home how important weight, always-on, all-wheel drive, and diff lock are in off-roading. So go check out his video. It'll actually give you some visuals on the testing. So definitely shout out to SD1 on that amazing video. Job well done. Okay, let's move on here to upside at number 5, and it can just do more things than farming. I did mention before in downside number 7 that it does have versatility as a downside. However, you can get a van body on here, and we'll talk about that here in our next upside of the benefits of this. But you can use it as kind of a mobile fuel tanker. You have some spare parts in there and also tires to repair people. It also can tow trailers as well. You can tow cargo with this if you want. However, just be aware because this vehicle is really big, so getting into tight spaces might be an issue. However, you can do multiple things with this vehicle. It's not just for farming. Okay, so moving on to our 6th and final upside of this list and of the whole video, it's going to be range and consumption. Same thing as the Kirovets K700. This vehicle does have a 340 liter 90-gallon tank. It's also coupled with the van body add-on, and the difference between this vehicle and the other van body add-on is I believe this one has a little less repair points. It does have 48 gallons or 180 liters of fuel combined with 2 spare wheels, so you can actually refuel pretty much half of a vehicle's tank if you want to use this as a repair vehicle. And also its range is going to be really good even if you have to travel long distances with this, because you now have 48 gallons or 180 extra liters to call upon. So not to mention that its engine really doesn't suck a lot of fuel, and it also has the advanced special gearbox, which also helps with fuel consumption as well. So guys, that is the pros for the K7M. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on what I think about both the Kirovets K7M and the K700. So in conclusion, the K700 and the K7M are really strong off-roaders that are very stable as well. I do feel they are very specialized for farming and not too much else. In truth, I believe other vehicles can do rescue missions just as good pending those tight spaces. The K7M is a monster off-roader. It actually might be one of the best, yet it is going to be hard to utilize it in those smaller areas. If I'm speaking honestly here, I think my excitement for these vehicles would have remained through Season 8 if there weren't so much farming. After a few missions, it became a burden. With only 2 trailer stores and long transits to every farming field, not to mention the bulk loading contract, I was more than happy to be done with farming. At the beginning of this season, I mentioned adding farming to prior seasons, of which I will take those words back right now. In closing, the K700 and the K7M fit the game better than the prior season with racing. It will be interesting to see how we use these vehicles moving forward in future seasons, especially the K7M with its amazing performance. Try these tractors out and let me know what you think. I hope this review gave you a fresh, new perspective of the Kirovets K7M and K700. Please smash that like button. Definitely share this video with someone who is currently struggling with the game, and subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content. Hope Hope you all have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless and stay upright.